Hello and welcome to the Grueling Truth Radio Network and the best available draft podcast. I am your host, as always, Matt Minnick, and today I am joined by a very special guest, Bill Carroll from Consens Draft Services. Bill, how are you doing today?
Oh, I am shipshape in Dover fashion. I am ready to do this.
All right, sounds good. So one thing I wanted to start with, I know you specialize a little bit in HBCU scouting. And I think that's, really HBCUs are something that outside of Grambling and the great Eddie Robinson, people don't know a ton about HBCU and, what they are. I myself, I coached against Southern, and at the time, at that level, I thought that they were only at the FCS level. I'm sorely mistaken about that. So just for the knowledge of everybody out there, can you talk a little bit about HBCUs and their historical significance?
Sure. So HBCUs have been around for over 100 years. The first recorded game was Biddle College, which is now known as Johnson C. Smith, took on Claflin State, and this was, turn of the century. There have been teams fielded by Hampton Institute, now Hampton University, Howard, and of course one of the great programs that sadly no longer has a football team was what used to be called Maryland State, later became Maryland Eastern Shore, which has a couple of Hall of Famers and a couple of guys who maybe weren't Hall of Famers but were darn close, to include the late Art Shell. I mean, there have been great programs. Deacon Jones, obviously. I mean, you could. A lot of the best players on those dynastic Steelers teams, like Donnie Shell, who was from Southern. You also had AUPB giving us Ernie Hollywood Bags Holmes. You had Mel Blount, right? Also an HBCU player. You had, it was that team in particular had some of their most important players come from HBCUs. Their backup quarterback for a while, in fact, he started for a while in their first Super Bowl run because of an injury to Bradshaw, Jefferson Street Joe Gilliam, the son of Joe Gilliam Sr., the legendary defensive coordinator under John Merrick at Tennessee State. Coach's kid in Jefferson Street Joe Gilliam. Everyone knows about Deacon Jones, who went to two HBCUs. More recently, we have the Payton brothers, Eddie, who was one of the great return men in the history of college and pro football. Of course, his brother Walter Payton, both coming from Jackson State. You've got, it's a long list. Harry Carson from South Carolina State. I could literally do this for about an hour, so I won't give you all of them. But historically speaking, some of the greatest coaches of all time, like Jake Gaither. Jake Gaither helped to teach Bear Bryant, the wing chief, when he moved away from running Wishbone. Many people don't know that. Bear Bryant went to a coaching clinic taught by the original Jake the Snake, Jake Gaither, the man who said, what I look for in a student athlete is someone who is mobile, hostile, and not too fragile. So he was one of the great, not just a great coach, but one of the great sort of characters in the history of American coaching. And frankly, he should be much more well-known than he is. John Merrick was an amazing coach. And of course, yes, everybody knows Eddie Robinson because he was literally built the program at Grambling. When he got there as a young man, they didn't have a practice field. They didn't have a locker room. He literally used to go out and use the groundskeeper. He did everything. He taped the players' ankles, and he built literally the program from nothing to basically the Notre Dame of black college football. And, of course, everyone knows about Jerry Rice. And there's a bunch of guys like Robert Porcher and other guys. It's a long, long, long list. So I won't spend much time on the players. But what it's been is a great laboratory for teaching football. And the gunslinger, Archie Cooley, who was the head coach at Mississippi Valley State when they had Willie Satellite Totten and Jerry World Rice, as their nicknames were back in the day, he devised an offense because he realized that what's everyone trying to do? Take away Jerry Rice, maybe the greatest football player of all time, but certainly he's on the short list of the greatest football players of all time. If he's not number one, he's in the top three. And he knew that every team they ever faced was going to be, their only goal was to shut down Jerry Rice. So he devised a quad box offense. whereby you've got 4 guys in a quad box on this side and Jerry Rice on the other. Okay, go ahead, double Jerry Rice. Enjoy. And so now he's got people running free in your secondary, and Willie Totten, who unfortunately came along at a time when black quarterbacks who were 6 feet tall were not the flavor du jour, so he didn't get a chance to play in the NFL. He played in CFL. But he tore it up. And, of course, he would eventually force people to stop doubling Jerry Rice because you're giving up all these, bombs all day long on the other side of the field. Got a quad box on this side, Jerry Rice on the other. And he was one of those classic pick your poison, which like to be suffocated, which like to be bludgeoned, drowned, pick your way. The other thing about HBCU football is, of course, it's known for its extremely colorful and sometimes brutal rivalries. At one point in the history of the rivalry between Hampton and Howard, Lincoln and Howard, they had to stop playing. A player died once in one of their games against each other. And remember, we're talking about in the 19-teens through about 1938, they would routinely have to move the games away from their home fields and go to a baseball field where they'd play in front of 38,000 fans, where they have a special train line that was put on in service to just carry the number of people who come to the game. And, of course, everyone knows about the Bayou Classic. And I grew up where we had the Battle of the Bay, which is Hampton versus Norfolk State. There's rivalries that are very historic, and they bring back players. They bring back alumni. Sometimes people who graduated 40, 50, in a few cases even 60 years before will come and see the Battle of the Bands. Sometimes the day before they'll have a step show. They'll have a big giant barbecue. They'll have all these events built around this because it's a touchstone. It is a cultural piece of wealth being handed down like a family heirloom from generation to generation to generation. So I hope that sort of puts a capstone on the importance and the function of HBCU football for you.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think just going through some of the names right away, I mean, it's a who's who of Hall of Famers that you list off there. So really incredible group, and
there's a bunch more I didn't get to, but yes, it's a long list.
I think a lot of the history of those things, that was something about Bear Bryant that I'd never heard before, and just the way some of that is lost in history. I'm sure in part on accident, but I'm sure in part intentionally too. Is it's really incredible, and so that's something that we got to make sure we hold on to those things and realize where some of those things came from, because that's really incredible.
Sure, Coach. I think it's important always to remember anything that got us from where we were to where we are. Sorry, go ahead.
No, absolutely. I'm with you on that. So, I know in recent years there's been some big time players from historically black colleges that have made an impact right away in the NFL. I know Tariq Cohen a couple years ago, and then his one of the guys that was blocking for him, Brandon Parker, coming out and starting right away for the for the Oakland Raiders. Definitely making an impact there. And then a huge one this year, Darius Leonard, falls into the second round, and he's the defensive rookie of the year in the NFL. Beating out Bradley Chubb, who was, I think, the 4th overall pick. Beating out Derwin James, who was, he was a huge guy, and there was getting a lot of talk, and guy from Florida State. So there was a lot of hype and some big time guys that went way in front of him. And there you have Leonard going to the second round of the Colts and just tearing it up.
But he's winding down we'll see if he ever gets in the Hall of Fame, but he's winding down a great career at South Carolina State. A lot of great players have come out of that program. He's known for defense. I mean, not too many years before, if you follow his program, or look at what the Steelers got, I think in the 3rd round, right, from South Carolina State. Incredibly powerful, smart, quick young tackle who, I mean, no one really replaces Casey Hampton. I guess they still haven't really replaced Casey Hampton. But the best young tackle they've gotten in years is from South Carolina State as well. So there's always going to be talent there. Obviously, it's not like it was in the 40s, 50s, and 60s just because, integration has siphoned off the top black talent. But they're still really good players.
Yeah, absolutely. So, looking forward this year, who sticks out to you as some guys who might be like Leonard, like Cohen, guys who can just step in and be household names in the NFL right away as rookies?
Well, I don't know. I won't say household names. I don't know if there's that kind of year. There's guys who I think can contribute, and they might be more special teams or valued reserves. But I'll start with Big Ty. Tyron Roberts from Winston-Salem State University is a big, powerful athlete, a handful to block, surprisingly athletic for a man of his bulk, and once again, a hard worker, a kid who just wants to get better, I think he might be part of someone's rotation. I don't know if he's going to take away a starting job right away. One of the better quarterbacks. There's two really good quarterbacks, and I'll start first with Amir Hall at Bowie State. Amir Hall is a guy who was a finalist for the Harlan Hill Trophy, which is the Division II, quote-unquote, version of the Heisman. And, classic dual-threat quarterback, but he's a legitimate dual threat. I mean, some people say that just because the guy can run. That's a one threat. That's not dual. No, he can throw the ball extremely well. And he's not a deadly runner, but he's an effective runner. He prefers to pass the ball, but he can get out on the edge. He's the kind of guy that can pick you. If you go into, playing two-man who's 3rd and 6, he'll get you 6 yards. He's not Robert Griffin III or something, but he's a functional runner, and he's a very smart guy, super hardworking, had a very good week of practice in the NFLPA game, and I think put himself in the eyes of scouts a little higher up. He's probably still going to be a guy that might even go undrafted, but he'll be in a camp and he'll have a shot. Another defender that I really like is Capri Doucet, who goes to Hampton, and a sort of great all-purpose linebacker. He's a guy who can be used as a situational pass rusher. He's not big enough to play with his hand in the dirt all the time, but very developed as a pass rusher. He's not one of those guys who's just dipping and ripping and only has one move. He has some counters. He has pretty good hand usage. He can even play inside linebacker at times. He's versatile. He's a sort of a chess piece. You can move around the board. Once again, high football IQ kid, smart, tough, is good and wants to get better, and which is what I always look for. One of my favorite safeties is Devontae Reynolds from NC Central, North Carolina Central. Thick, powerful body, about 5'10" and change, probably about 202 or so pounds. Runs well, brings the thump. He can come down in the box and lay the wood on people. He can cover. A ball hawk. He's the modern safety, right? The guy who you no longer are sort of locked into being, well, are you Cam Chancellor, are you Earl Thomas? Some teams still sort of go by those archetypes, but a lot of teams want agnostic safeties, right? A guy who, hey, if I need you to come down the box, you can do that. If I need you to cover a slot, you can do it. If I need you to cover a tight end or running back, you can do it. If I need you to cover the deep middle, you can do it. So he can do all of those things. He's wildly underrated. Didn't get invited to the Shrine Game or NFLPA. Didn't get invited to the Senior Bowl, all of which blew my mind. A terrific player who is truly sort of slipping through the cracks. But I think his pro day is going to be where people are sort of forced to awaken to him. I think he's going to wildly outperform, I think, what people are expecting. And, once again, smart, tough, driven to get better. He's going to help you right away on special teams. That's where a lot of going to help right away. I would love to see there's another Darius Leonard come out of the pike, but those guys don't come all that often. It's like asking the guys at Wisconsin, hey, when do you have another J.J. Watt ready for us? Whoa, hold on. Give us a moment. Mm-hmm. It takes a while to come up with these guys who are sort of very, very rare talents. But there are certainly some really, really good talents. I don't want to mislead you and have you think there's another Darius Leonard just heading our way right away. Sadly, those guys are very hard to come by. But there are some guys who I strongly feel are going to have terrific NFL careers. And like I said, they'll probably start a little more slowly than maybe a Tariq Cohen or Darius Leonard. Those guys are the exception, not the rule. But I'll give you a couple more. Once again, these guys are a little more developmental, a little more they're good players who will probably take a while to eventually make their way into the starting lineup, but they will contribute, I think, in many cases sooner rather than later, but probably initially on what do you call it? Like the specials or in rotation. And there's a couple of kids who are, just babies. So this is sort of the view to file away for a future show. There's a kid who will just be a sophomore next year at Southern named Jordan Lewis, who's an absolute beast. But he's just a baby, so we can't get too excited about him yet. Next year, you can look for Darryl Johnson, also an absolute animal from NCAA. But for this year, Yariq Bethune, and Yariq is your classic edge type, could afford to put on probably another 12 or so pounds of muscle, but you can see it in him. He's got bend, he's got the hips, he's got the feet. Could probably still add a few more counter moves, but the basis is there. Like if you hand him to a guy who knows how to coach, he'll get excited about it because he has all the things you want to work with in a pass rusher. And like I said, the weight room stuff, that should be one of the easier things to deal with. He has the other things that, you just come out of, the natural ability is clearly there. I'll give you one more pass rusher amongst the HBCU class this year, Sterling Shippey, one of those names you won't soon forget. But a kid from Alcorn, and he had 8 sacks this year. Another guy who probably could do more work in terms of getting his body stronger and technique, but the stuff, right? The clay, as people talk about, it's clay that you can shape. It's the things that you want to work with. And he's a good-sized kid. He's got sort of that tweener body, right, where we've been talking a lot about this with Geno Atkins and Ed Oliver, whatever, a guy who's probably going to measure slightly under 6'1", probably going to measure in the low 280s, but very quick and just surprising snap. He doesn't have the prettiest body in the world, but his tape is very, very impressive. And when you see him, the way we see him move, you realize there's a place for this kid, right? There's a place for this kid. He'll probably either need to get bigger if he's going to stay on the interior, or he'll need to change his body and to tighten up, basically, if he's going to try to play, sort of one of those stubbier edge guys like Brandon Graham. He'll probably need to drop 15 or 20 pounds. But he's got the things you look for. Tremendous motor, attacks like crazy, can read the screens, can read the draws, doesn't get suckered into influence plays, tough as heck, can fight, even though he's not quite the size you want on the inside. I've seen him successfully fight double teams. I've seen him split double teams. I've seen him know when to shoot the gap and try to get in there and blow up a play in the backfield. I've seen him also know when not to do that so as not to, like I said, make an easy place for a soft place for the offense to attack.
Yeah, you definitely see a lot of versatility in the NFL nowadays, too, looking for some of those guys that are traditionally too small for that position, particularly in pass rush situations, getting in there, kind of being the AC/DC guy that can play on the edge in running situations, even though those are a bit few and far between anymore in the NFL. But can go inside and, take out some of those bigger guys that don't have quite the pass rush moves. And I think especially too, and you get worn down and you're expecting power moves from a guy that's 320, 340 all day, then you sub a guy in like that. And I think that's a great example of how some of these guys, like you're saying, they might not be a huge splash. Maybe the defensive rookie of the year isn't in this class of HBCU athletes, but some guys that can definitely have a role and contribute. Right.
I think you're going to see several guys who will come in, they'll push, right? They'll push whoever's ahead of them. Sometimes that's one of the great values of a guy sees, this new kid come in, and maybe he comes in slightly better shape. Maybe he, watches a little more tape. Maybe he takes a couple more reps, and, maybe he hits the weights a little harder because he sees this hungry 22-year-old. I'll throw just a couple more names out there that are guys to look out for. At the D2 level, from Clark, Atlanta, Cameron Rogers is another one of those guys who is fun to watch. Somebody will have to put together a plan for how to use him because he doesn't have everything you need. He's not one of those guys who can do everything, but he's got natural pass rush moves, and I've seen him, he's a good penetrator. He figures out, he's slippery. He figures out a way to get through, to get in there, and he's got, like I said, hips, the wiggle, he can slither in there, and you'd like to see him, once again, maybe get a little stouter, but productive. Once again, some of these guys don't have access to everything that they might want to have in terms of even just food, let alone the weight room. That's one of the one things I will say, unfortunately, is that some of the HBCUs are under-resourced compared to the other state colleges in their area, and, there's lots of reasons, I guess we could get into why sometimes that happens. And sometimes it's mismanagement internally, but sometimes there's other things going on. There was a time when Jackson State was dealing with a ridiculous MRSA outbreak, and they found that, there's all kinds of things going on where the locker room had been built that were substandard. Things happen. They happen every place, but some of these things happen, more for whatever reason sometimes to HBCUs than they do to other schools. But I truly think that if you're interested in finding those guys, because you do need to find those guys who can, maybe they don't play every down, maybe they don't play every single situation, but they play the most important situation, right? Third down, right? I mean, if you're playing defense, right? What's the down that you really, really need? You care about them all, but what's the money down? The money down is third down. So the guy, even if he doesn't play all the time, but he comes in and he's the closer. He comes in on third down. He shuts it down. That guy has a place in the NFL and will have a place in the NFL for, now and forevermore. I'll give you one other D2 name on defense, and that's Terrence Leatherwood. And when I've been watching Terrence, and he's one of those guys where when I first saw him, he was a linebacker. Came in as a linebacker, and, you can still see the linebacker movement skills. It's one of those things you often see at TCU where a guy comes in as a defensive back, comes in as a safety or even a corner, and they turn him into a linebacker. Guy comes in as a linebacker to make him into a DN. Guy comes in as a DN to make him into a D tackle. TCU is world famous for that. They have these guys come in and put on 30 pounds, 40 pounds sometimes in their career, but they still hold on to, they still retain those movement skills that allow them to be, to be really quick, explosive, problematic, whatever term you want to use to deal with. Well, as you said, if you're a 320-something pound dude, the last thing you want to deal with is some guy who, was 212 pounds a year ago and now he's 240-something, but he still moves like a 212-pounder, right? Mm-hmm. That's not who. Why do you want me to do that? It's like taking a baseball bat and trying to hit a fly, right? If you connect, you're going to really crush that fly, but the hard part is connecting. That's another guy I would throw onto the list.
Yeah, and I think that that speaks to what you were saying before about some of these guys are kind of raw clay that maybe they didn't have the resources to really be able to pack on the pounds and get the most out of the work they're putting in the weight room, and they're still coming into the NFL and they're like 22 years old. There's still an opportunity to build muscle mass and maintain some of that speed. So, I think you're looking at a lot of guys that can still do that moving forward.
One of my favorite stories,
they can stick around.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories is Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie, right? Another Tennessee Stater. The kid's nickname was Baloney because when he came in, he was eating. He was so skinny. He never got to be. Never got to be a really big guy, but he was 153 pounds or something when he first came onto campus. and he was eating nothing but bologna sandwiches. I mean, before the meal plan got turned on, the kid was, trying to not to die basically until the meal plan came online and he could actually eat. So there are challenges. I think people, and of course they've fixed some of this. I know they recently sort of restructured the way some of the food works, and I'm glad that they did that in the last sort of reworking of the way student athletes are treated. But people sort of assume that it's just free-flowing food all day, all night. And of course, it's different now. It's a little closer to that. But there was a time when certain times of the year where kids were, scrambling. It's like, well, how much money have you got, or who's got such and such, or whose mom sent a care package. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk a couple of DBs. One is because I played DB, and two, because there are some good ones running around loose out there. And it's, once again, there's a great heritage of great DB play at the Division II, at the HBCU level, both Division II and FCS. And some of the guys that I've liked, and I mentioned that, obviously Devontae Reynolds was a guy that came right to my mind immediately because I think he has a chance to be really, really good. I mean, I don't think he'll be an out-of-the-box starter, but do I think he could come down the line and maybe year 2 or 3 and be a starter? I most certainly do believe that. And especially if he goes to the right situation, the right team, the right, somebody who knows how to use him, because like I said, he's got the things you look for, but then some of the other guys, like I said, there's a few others that I think are very deserving of mention, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention them. There's always been good corners in HBCU football, and there always will, even with, like I said, not having maybe as many as they used to. And one guy is a guy that's not even draft eligible yet, so I'll just mention him very quickly. Dante Small, Morgan State, keep an eye out for that kid. He'll just be a junior next year, but when his time comes, boy howdy. Kawan Selby at Delaware State is a guy who I think will excel in covering slot. He's been playing, boundary. He's played all over in his collegiate career, but I think his future is as a slot defender. And, once again, sometimes those guys aren't announced with the starters. They announce, 3 linebackers or 4 linebackers. But you and I both know, as of, I don't have the numbers for the last season, the 2018-19 season, but the 2017-18 season, 58% of the snaps, NFL defenses were in nickel. So they might not announce you with the starters, but you're really a starter if you're a nickelback in the NFL nowadays.
Yeah, it's one of those things that defense really gets ripped off on that, because they announce the starting lineup, and halftime they'll announce a tight end, they'll announce 3 receivers, and I mean if the team has a fullback, half the time they'll announce that guy too. They're announcing like 14 people on offense, but they still just announce the 4-3 base or 3-4 base starters on defense for some reason, even though you're absolutely right. You're seeing a ton of nickel, and you're seeing a decent amount of 3 safety looks nowadays too. So yeah, definitely, you're definitely working in that direction. Speed kills, especially as they're spreading out on offense. You got to be able to match that. So absolutely.
I'm wondering which NFL team, and it wouldn't be shocking if the Patriots, because they're always on the cutting edge of certain things. But some team's going to finally come out and base in 3-3-5 or base in 4-2-5, and just make them have to announce that 5th D back. But essentially, the 5th defensive back is a starter nowadays, and so that's a guy like I said, I think that's what his role will be, and I think he will excel at it. And once again, obviously, he'll have to play specials, and I think he'll do well at that. From the day he gets on.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, I think the other thing that gets lost in this, there's a lot of value to that guy too, because he's asked to do things that outside corners aren't. So it's not, and you see teams where that guy's he's not the third guy. He's just the guy he's the guy that's best in the slot. And you see a lot of teams where when they are in their quote unquote base, he's staying on the field and he's playing the outside. I know Chris Harris is a great example of a guy that they move all over the place, and he's a great player in the slot, but clearly one of the best outside corners in the league as well. But not everybody that plays outside can do that.
And Malcolm Jenkins is an air quotes linebacker, just like Deion Buchanan is an air quotes linebacker. But these teams are really playing with three safeties all the time, pretty much. And Avonte Maddox, who was originally coming on to play backup free safety, but ended up starting everywhere, right? He played slot for them. He played both corners for them. I mean, he was a season saver practically for the Eagles defense. I mean, shout out to Avonte Maddox, who did. I mean, he might not have been the rookie of the year for the league, but he sure as heck was the rookie of the year for the Eagles. They would have been sunk without Avonte Maddox playing at various points 3 or 4 different positions in their defense.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that was a group that had a lot of problems at different times, and and he was definitely a big part of making them come together and help that team rally at the end there. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let me just throw out a couple guys. Getting back to quarterbacks for a second, a name that will be somewhat familiar to you, Kailyn Newton, of course, is the younger brother of Cam Newton, and he will be a junior at Howard next year. He's nowhere near the size, but he's a very, very athletic kid, and he's got a very strong arm. And once again, we're going to see if people are willing to sort of stray away from the prototype of the NFL quarterback. He's probably going to measure at 5'10" and change, maybe 5'11", but he's a pretty thick kid. He's probably going to be somewhere in the low 200s, maybe close to 210, but he's going to run well. I think probably sub 4.6. He's going to jump high. He's going to show he knows the game. He and Cam, obviously, beyond the genetics, also share a lot of information about how to play the game. And it'll be interesting to see how he's treated by the draft process. If he gets invited to things like the Shrine Game or the Senior Bowl or the NFLPA game, I'm hoping that he gets an opportunity to show what he can do. But Kailyn is a different kind of quarterback from Cam, partially because, he's not 6'5", but he has some of the things in common in that very athletic and has a ability to drive the ball down the field, which sort of belies his size. Another quarterback I would be very much remiss in mentioning is Delman Williams, and I think Delman will be greatly helped by the addition of these new leagues like the XFL and AAF. Delman is not a guy who will be ready to come right out of the box and push a starter or even a backup quarterback in the NFL. But you give him a couple of years in another league to learn more about picking apart defenses, to develop more and to get cleaner mechanics, to grow into playing the quarterback position more efficiently and more crisply, and watch out. He has, once again, a guy with really good physical ability. Strong arm, runs very, very well, not afraid of taking a lick. I've seen him take some wicked shots and bounce right back up. You don't want that in a quarterback, obviously, but it's one of the things that sort of fires up the team when he picks up a third down. He isn't sliding. He goes, shoulder first or head first into a linebacker and it pops up. And, the quarterback coach is hating it. The offensive coordinator is hating it. The head coach is probably a little bit nervous, but the team gets all psyched. And I'll give you one other HBCU quarterback, and once again, a young kid to look out for. And this guy may have the highest ceiling of all the HBCU quarterbacks I've mentioned so far. His name's Akil Glass. He's at Alabama A&M, and he's just a junior. Well, he'll be a junior. He's a rising junior. He just completed his sophomore season, and he was exhilarating. And he is full-sized. He's listed at 6'5". He's probably a legitimate 6'4", about 214 pounds. Has that whippy motion, almost a little reminiscent of a guy like Randall Cunningham. Flexible, athletic, smart, and like I said, makes throws. He can make what people call NFL throws, those outside the hash, deep down the field, comebacks and fades and, the deep post and the skinny post and the big arm throws. He can make the big arm throws, I guess is all I was to say. He can make those throws that he doesn't have to baby them. He can put them in there on a line. He doesn't have to lollipop them in there. He can get them there with something on them. They get there with a little bit of a smoke trail on some of them. So I'll be interested to see, and please, I hope he gets to go to some of the. I would love to see him. If he has some of the other guys at some of the bigger bowl games or all-star games, I hope he gets invited to one of the bigger all-star games, because I think he's going to really impress people who have a tendency sometimes to underestimate some of these guys, if they see this kid up close in person, one, because he does have this sort of prototypical body, but two, he can really put something on the football. I think he'll be one of those guys that will gain some steam when his year comes out. He'll just be a junior next year, but I'm excited as all get about him. I didn't mean to talk about him that much, but I'll throw one wide receiver your way. And once again, he'll just be a senior next year, but so watch out for him next year. His name is Jaquez Izzard at Howard, speedster, but good hands too. He's not a guy that just has speed, but he runs away from people on the regular. And I'll be super excited about watching him next year. A guy who's even 2 years down the road is Trendavian Dixon at Texas Southern. We'll have to wait on him. And there's a baby who'll just be a sophomore, Dewan Miller at Arkansas Pine Bluff. And when that kid figures out what he's doing out there, I mean, he's producing just on God-given ability. I mean, you throw a freshman out there, he kind of sort of knows what he's doing, but he doesn't really know what he's doing. When he knows what he's doing, he's going to be death. So talented. Let me see. I should get some love to the big guys, right? Yeah. Coming up this year is Duane Brown Sr., and, South Florida native, big, powerful kid, probably should lean up a little bit, which I think he's probably working on right now as we speak. You want to keep the size. You just want to have more of it be a little packed in there, a little tighter. And I believe that's what he's probably working on as we speak is, getting the groceries packed in the bags a little tighter than they are right now. But you know how it is. But once that gets done, watch out for him. Duane has the stuff. Once again, the basic stuff you want, the things you work on. He has the stuff you can't teach. One, if he likes to finish people, he wants you to feel him. And here's the other cool thing: the kid is a cancer survivor. So no matter what happens to him on a football field, he's been through worse. He's been through tougher things, right? You know that. This kid's not going to crumble, right? He's not going to worry about being coached hard, or he's not going to, roll up in a ball if something bad happens. The kid's beaten cancer. So you bring a kid like that.
I think that's huge. I think people don't realize the guys that make it in the NFL, like there's guys that are immensely talented, obviously, where their talent really pushes them through, but most of those guys are guys that are right up there talent-wise, but can push through it, and are willing to put in the work and are willing to do it. And I think especially for linemen, because they don't keep many linemen around, and that's why guys who can play multiple positions are very valuable. This AAF is going to be great for developing linemen because you see a lot. There's a lot of guys in the league right now who were on practice squads for like 2 years before they even made an active roster, and now they're starting and pretty decent offensive linemen. It's just a real slow development there, and they don't retain guys very much. So, those guys are really going to fight for it and be able to hang on.
And the other thing is, of course, learning to play multiple positions. If you're not a franchise left tackle, right? If that's not what you are, you better be able to play multiple positions. That's the only time a guy can just be, a quote-unquote specialist on the offensive line. If you are one of those elite-level left tackles. If you're anything else, if there's anything else that you are, you had better be able to. Oh yeah, I can play a little center. I can play some guard. I can play. I can team tackle. I can play right and left side. If that's not your story, then you better be a little more versatile. I'll stick also, as I talked about Duane, one of his teammates is a terrific linebacker named Trenton Bridges. And Trenton's one of those guys who, what's the term there? He's a dog, right? He's a dog. Plays his heart out, a leader. Guys look to him, first in, last out, all those sort of cliches about that guy who's a football lifer. And when he's done playing, he's going to coach. When he's done coaching, he'll die. You know what I mean? Like he's a football lifer. He doesn't have a lot of other interests or hobbies. He's a football guy. So I asked him, I actually got a chance to talk to him a little bit. I was asking about like other things, and he had to struggle, to come up with other things. Well, I like music. Okay, good. There we go. Yeah. But he's kind of a guy who's all ball. There's not a whole lot else going on with him. Mm-hmm. And some teams love that, you know. I mean, whether it's right or wrong, and that's a great debate to have probably over another time. You know, some guys are Renaissance men, right? They write poetry, they speak a bunch of languages, they travel the world, and it's cool. I mean, Larry Fitzgerald's a guy that's done a lot of things, and he's going to, whatever he does next in his life, he's going to be great at it. Whether he goes into the booth, whether he decides to just, you know, put all of his time into his charitable work, he's going to be great.
Oh, yeah.
You know, obviously Tony Romo is a guy that could be on the celebrity Pro-Am tour as a golfer, was a guy that had some recruiting, you know, going around his golfing. Even while he was sort of scrambling on the football side, he could have gone to a couple of decent golf programs, but football was his first love. Trenton's not that. He's a linebacker and doesn't really have much else going on. But, I mean, he took up his business in school. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he got his degree. He's graduated and everything. But other than that, you know, loves his family, loves football, took care of his business in school. Not much else happening. And once again, there's guys who look for that. There's guys who love that guy who, you know, this is it. I'm a football player. I don't really think about too much else. And coaches love that. So some coaches at least. So I think he's a guy who's going to find his way somebody's camp, and he's going to make it hard to he'll be hard to cut. You know, some guys make it hard on you.
Yeah, and I think you know, the way that they do limit the contact hours in college, whether or not that's, you know, how well that's enforced is anybody's guess. But you know, some of these guys, it's a huge awakening when they get to the NFL, like realizing, oh, this is an actual full-time job, you know. So a guy like that, you know, is ready for it, not only ready for it but excited for it. That's definitely a benefit.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of kids out there. That's their whole thing. It's like, well, you know, if it's not about football, I don't really have a whole lot of interest in it. And yeah, I mean, it can always be argued either way. Do you want a well-rounded man for all seasons, or do you want a guy who's all ball? There's always guys who are in both of those categories out there if that's what you're seeking. But that's a kid who's, like I said, he's all ball. He wants to. He likes going to the weight room. He likes going to the film room. He likes going to practice. You know, you won't have to ever talk him into anything football related. He's, you know, buy in. I bought in. I got the receipt. You know, there's no more discussion needed with a guy like that. So I think some coaching staff will fall in love with him. And like I said, I don't think he'll get drafted, but I think that I dare you to try to cut him. He's going to make it hard as heck.
Absolutely. And you know, that's the other thing too. Like you mentioned before, you know, having the AAF, hopefully that thing is able to stick it out, just to have another avenue and some time to develop these guys. You know, I think that's kind of gone away, and I think it's a tough pursuit from some of the arena leagues to try and get in, and you know, without NFL Europe, I mean, that's how we developed Kurt Warner, was, you know, with the Iowa Barnstormers and the Amsterdam Admirals, and now he's an NFL Hall of Famer. So it's
right.
Definitely going to be good for some of these guys that are going to need some time to develop, you know, to be able to get those reps and see that high level of competition. Really, I think more than anything, get film against, you know, guys that went to the SEC schools, so you can get real good comparisons on them, because a lot of the times I think we have trouble making that distinction when we're watching film of somebody from an FCS school or a Division II school. You have trouble seeing what that guy's going to be able to do against the guys that went to Bama, and yeah, so having that avenue and being able to compete against some of those guys, that's definitely going to be huge.
And that's one of the things why it's so important to these kids. I keep saying kids, young men. Anyone who's less than 40 to me is not a kid. But one of the things about these young men is there's only a limited number of slots at the Senior Bowl. There's only a certain number of slots, you know, at East West Shrine or NFLPA, but it's so precious to these guys. and they are so fired up about the opportunity. I mean, once again, I get to talk to some of these guys, and I can tell you that they are so excited. I mean, it blows my mind with some kids, and then once again, young men, whatever. I know they get the opportunity, and some of them turn it down. Maybe they're not 100% after the end of the season, maybe whatever it is. But one of these kids from Bethune-Cookman, one of these kids from Howard, from Norfolk State, from Langston, from Fayetteville State. If they have to have a blood transfusion, if they have to have their legs strapped to them with, they're going to go. You know what I mean? Like, you want to if you invite a kid from one of those schools to one of these All-Star games, if you told them that they had to ride there on the top of a Greyhound bus, they would be, okay, what time does the Greyhound bus come? Like, they're going. You don't have to worry about them turning down or whatever. Their invitation will be accepted immediately. So, and once again, I'm not here to judge anybody. I mean, some of these guys have legitimate reasons for not taking advantage of the opportunity. I do hope that guys realize, even if you can't play, even if your body won't allow you to go out there and compete physically on the field, hope you realize that you get a chance to speak to NFL decision makers. You get a chance to speak one-on-one, even if just a few moments, before, during, or after a practice to, a scout or sometimes even a GM or a person who's in, the college scouting department. It's a wafer-thin decision. When you're in a draft room, in whatever round, and obviously everyone talks about the first round, but the wafer gets thinner and thinner as you go later and later in the draft, right? The teams are usually pretty invested in sorting out between the guys in the first couple of rounds. They really do a lot of work on separating out. But once you get from round 4 on, that wafer is not even a wafer thin. Like, you can read through it. You can read a newspaper through it. And there's almost no wafer left by the time you get to the line between being a 7th-round player and an undrafted free agent. There's a lot of guys who go undrafted on one team's board that would have been a 5th-round on another team's board. It's like I said, there's almost no difference between those guys in the last couple of rounds. And so that personal contact, that brief conversation, that shook your hands, looked you in the eye, that's the difference sometimes between a guy that is being brought in as an undrafted free agent and being drafted late in the draft. It's that thin. It's that little a decision sometimes. But it's a big decision, but that little a distinction, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a lot of gray area when you get into that, and those top guys are top guys on everybody's board for the most part. I think it's kind of funky nowadays. And many years ago when it was a 12-round draft, it wasn't such an issue. But now, I saw a stat the other day. There were more people on NFL rosters last year that were undrafted than were drafted in the first round. So by a lot too. It was something like 500 to like 120, something like that. So I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. And these guys, the NFL misses on guys all the time. And they miss at the top because they're looking at the shiny objects and they're looking at the big guy and projecting things. But especially some of these guys that are not playing, that are playing at the FCS, they're playing at the Division II level, and are just bringing it every day. There's something to be said about those guys, even though they might be at that level, because you're like a Tariq Cohen, you're tiny, and you're not getting the scholarship over to those big schools because of your size, or there might be sometimes the obvious problem with somebody is something that you can overcome, a lot better than the intangible things that often make NFL players fail.
Or sometimes it's something as little as your family can't send you to the right camp for you to be seen by the guy from Oklahoma. I mean, it's amazing to be. And once again, I could go on a rant about the current high school recruiting process that would go on for quite some time, so I won't. But I've seen guys go from being a 3-star to a 5-star just when a guy from Alabama, right, one of the Alabama guys, an Alabama coach said, I like this kid. The guy was a 3-star. The day before that, you look at the rankings, the next time the rankings come out, he's not a 5-star, just because Alabama likes him. It's crazy. This kid didn't get any better. He didn't get bigger, he didn't get stronger, he didn't get faster, he didn't lift more weights, he didn't watch more tape. Just one guy from one school liked him. Boom, 2 more stars. It just drives me crazy something to go on in the recruitment process. But a kid from a small school, or a kid from a school that's not very good, even though he's an absolute beast, but his school isn't good, or his school doesn't have a great tradition or a great reputation, or the coaches don't do a great job of getting their kids out there. There's all these things that play into it, and academics, and a million different things play into it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think to some extent too, like when you talk about somebody who's at a bad program or who stands out at a smaller program, the loyalty they've shown to stick it out and to compete in that program says a lot about their character too, and what they'll be able to do at the next level. When it's not easy to transfer, you got to sit out, but there are guys that can put together some tape at a losing school in the Sun Belt. And dominate, and maybe they're going to be able to get into a bigger program, but seeing guys stick that out, it definitely says a lot about who they are.
Yeah, so that's the thing that I think when I occasionally, like we all do, occasionally get to talk to an NFL scout, a guy that I maybe got to know at a pro day, or we saw each other at the combine, or whatever it is. And so I say, hey, you got a business card? Or he'll say, no, but here's my, hit me up on LinkedIn or whatever it is. And we'll talk a little bit. And once again, there's teams that are extremely open to being told about a kid, and there's teams that say, we're good. Don't try to sell me on some kid. So I'm respectful of that. But there are some that are. There's 3 or 4 guys I talk to who say, yeah, you got some kid. You've never steered us wrong before. Yeah, tell me about this kid. Who is this kid? And then some are like, yeah, thanks. You're an amateur. We're professionals. Leave it to the professionals. They don't quite put it that way, but they're kind of putting it that way. So for the ones that are open to it, I'll say, hey, take a look at this kid. And if I think a kid is a good player but not really an NFL player or not used to NFL right away, I'll be honest. I'll say it right away. I like this kid. And if I had a football league or whatever, of course now we do have some additional leagues, so that's good news. I would play this kid, but he's not ready to play in the NFL right now. Now this kid, so sort of, let him know what I know about a kid and his background and what I've heard from his coaches and all that stuff like that. And a friend of mine used to be one of the people who was part of the process for putting together the roster for the NFLPA game. He's now actually working in the AAF, but he says, get in his ear sometimes, and I guess one of my great quote-unquote success stories was a kid from McNeese State named Deontay Spencer, who's now signed a futures contract with the Steelers. But he went up to the Ottawa Red Blacks and had a really nice career in the CFL. But Deontay was a kid that was one of the last cuts with the Chargers the year he came out, 2014 or 15, one of those. And But back when he was at McNeese, I'd gotten, sort of interested in him. His tape was great. He's super quick and fast. He had long speed and quickness. And I was sort of in my friend's ear about him a lot. And so finally they had a kid get hurt, and a spot opened up at the NFLPA game. I was like, okay. So they brought him in. He was a late ad to the NFLPA game, and Deontay actually ended up being the MVP of the game.
That's awesome.
So I don't think he got there till like Thursday morning or something. So I mean, literally, he had like a walkthrough. He sat down with the playbook. He talked to the quarterbacks. He talked to the offensive coordinator. They did stuff in the hotel room at the Extended Stay America or whatever it was. I mean, I don't think I'm joking. It was almost to this extent because the kid got hurt like Wednesday's practice, so he was a very late ad. And
I'm picturing Willie Mays Hayes waking up in the parking lot and running the
Oh, there you go. Nice pull. Yeah, it was almost like that. And once again, I mean, God just gives some guys, certain stuff. So he shows up, balls out. He's the MVP. And like I said, I mean, the Chargers were pretty deep Chargers are usually pretty deep at receiver, but he was one of the last cuts. This was back before they went to the whole big giant cut, that we have nowadays. but back in the days when it was like more graduated. But he made it all the way to the last set of cuts, and like I said, tore it up in the CFL. Talented kid. And I think he's, especially with maybe recent events, he might end up being a valued contributor with the Steelers now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, great conversation. We're running out of time here, so I'm gonna have to cut it short. But so yeah, definitely some awesome information. A lot more names, coming out of this than are being floated around about some of these HBCU athletes that like you said, maybe they're not going to be household names next year, but can definitely get in there and make some noise and be contributors and maybe develop into something down the line. So I appreciate you joining me, Bill Carroll, again as my guest. Can you, if you want to real quick, tell people where they can find some of your work, both your historical work and your scouting work?
Sure. Well, for those who want to be introduced to my work, if you follow, just click on the hashtag, either hashtag Black Football History or hashtag Black Football History Month. You can look through years, actually, of tweets out there. I've been doing this since 2013 or 14, and one of those. You get old, you stop remembering exactly. But you will find lots of information. You may not even want it all, but it's out there. And I write for Nuts and Bolts Sports. I contribute to them, and especially heavily during this month. So you'll see things dropping from me all throughout this entire month. And then from now through the draft, I do a series of articles for them called Nuts and Bolts Sports called Blue Light Specials. And it's about guys who have a chance to either be drafted late or will be undrafted free agents, but I think have a real chance to contribute. And these are some amazing young men, and some of them have gone on to have very, very nice careers. Amongst the more successful ones, with the Ravens, come on, Bill. Number 99 from, Grand Valley? Oh, my gosh, Matt Judon. There we go. Matt Judon was one of my guys that I featured in the past. Whatever. There's been a decent number of them that have had success. But once again, I thank you so much for allowing me to come here and clog up your show with a bunch of stuff. And so now, at some point, I'm going to have to ask you to return the favor. I have a couple of shows I do myself. Feeling a Draft is draft-focused. And then I have a coaching show I do every now and again. And then I have which is definitely a couple times a year, but I do also every week I do the CDS Pro Prospects radio show, which is interview focused, where I bring on young men and talk to them about their lives and their careers. But I definitely like to have you on one of either the draft show or maybe one of the coaching shows in the future.
Absolutely. Let me know when, and I appreciate even if this wasn't on the podcast, I appreciate the conversation and happy to do it again. So. Once again, I'm Matt Minnick, and for my guest, Bill Carroll, this is the best available draft podcast, not the one you were looking for, but the best one that was available when you were picking. And we will be back next week with more NFL draft information. Thank you.